In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. Well, Advent, we're in Advent now. Yay, we got our purple, we've got our Advent wreath, and we are ready. But it's important to know that Advent is a season of awareness. It's a season of preparation, but it's a season of awareness. And one of the things I became aware about myself recently was that I am far more sentimental than I thought I was. I watched a TV commercial yesterday, and I found myself tearing up at a TV commercial. I'm not kidding. And then I watched another one, and I found myself tearing up at that, and I'm thinking, what is wrong with me? But that's something I know about myself. Now, if you want to know what these commercials are, I'll tell you. The one, these are parenthood ones. I always find myself really sentimental with parenthood ones. So here's one where there's a dad, and he has this little girl. And for Christmas, she gets him a World's Best Dad mug. Everybody's got one of those, right? It is one of the classic things. And the dad is like, this is the best thing in the world. And throughout the commercial, the girl grows up. And at first she's really excited that dad's using her mug all the time. And then she's like, she doesn't really care. And by the time she hits adolescence, she's like, oh, Dad, really, do you have to use that thing? And he's like, I got your mug. And she's like, please. And you think, okay, we get it, adolescents, they can be kind of jerks. But then, what happens? One Christmas, she's gone away. She comes and rings the bell, and she gives him his present, and it says, World's Best Grandpa. And they're all, hugging everything. Now, this is actually not just an American thing. On the internet, on Facebook, there was another one, but it was from France, and it was almost identical, except it was this guy with his little baby boy. And he's got this cassette deck. Remember cassette decks? And he's playing some song from the 70s on it, and he's dancing around with this baby boy to this song. And then when the kid gets a little older, they're dancing around the same song. And as it gets a little bit older, just the dad's starting to dancing around, and the kid's just watching. And then the kid hits adolescence. And the dad, being a dad, is at the mall with him at the food court, and the kid's like, as the dad's dancing around to the song, and the kid's like, can I just crawl under the table and pretend I don't know him? It's almost exactly the same thing. And then, at Christmas, the boy's grown and gone. But under the tree, the dad hears something ringing. And so he opens it up, and it's an iPad, and it's his son. And he's Skyping with him. And all of a sudden, that same, can you believe it? That same song is playing, and there's that boy with his baby boy dancing. And they're all three dancing. And I'm like, I can't believe this, Mom. So one of the things I learned is that I'm way too sentimental. But one of the other things I learned is that sometimes a secular commercial gets it. Now, I have no idea what they were trying to sell. But it doesn't matter. Because what they got was that this dad was always there, always loving, never stopped. And the kid had to go through something called adolescence to figure out what it meant to be their own person, and then to figure out that the dad's love was always there. And I bring this up in part because I have a confession to make. And it really is truly a confession. I got in a fight the other day in my collar at Cranberries when I had the free prayer sign on the little table, and I got in a fight. No, not fist fight, mind you. I don't do that. But the raised voices kind of fight, the kind where Megan behind the counter says, Chuck, be quiet now. People are looking. It was about the youth of today. It was about teenagers. And it was an old guy who I've known for a long time, and we were always in these discussions back and forth. And this one, he said, the kids today, they don't want to work. They're lazy bums. They don't want to fight for what I did. Nobody gave me anything, at which point, that's when I jumped in and I said, oh, you want to bet? You want to bet? And so we go at it. But primarily what we're going at is the same thing that people my age do. It's sort of a second adolescence. When adolescence hits a teenager, their parents become stupid. It only lasts a while, but they're embarrassing. You don't want them to be around. They're horrible. But when the people hit my age, teenagers become the most horrible people in the world. They're lazy. They're rude. They don't want to do anything. They sleep until noon if they get up early. And I go to them and I say, listen, you sound just like my grandfather did when I was a kid. And he said, well, maybe you were lazy. I said, no. I'm no more lazy than you were when you were a kid, or when Mark Twain was when he was a kid. The fact is, adolescence is a very, very different time. But it's also one that is absolutely essential. You can't get away from it. Parents, you just have to deal with it. Adolescents, you just have to live with it. You can't live without it. And I said, we just have to get over the phrase, kids these days. That should be banned from the whole vocabulary. Because that just means we're not paying attention to what's going on with them. We're not seeing the amazing stuff happening. We're not seeing the heart. We're not seeing the growth. All we're seeing is this kid hunched back there going, I can't believe Dad did that. Or, I'll get to it eventually, or something like that. You know what teenagers are like. It's just the way it's going to be. But if Advent is about awareness, it's also about adolescence. Because we are all adolescents. Every single one of us. Even the oldest of us. At 8 o'clock, I said, we're all adolescents. And John Golden's like, not me. And I said, oh yeah, all of us. And here's why. Because in the history of humanity, this moment in time is just a tiny blink. We haven't been around all that long. If we survive this era, it's sort of like adolescence. If you survive adolescence, it's marvelous. You just got to get to adulthood. Think about humanity, and I've talked about this before, so it's nothing new really. Humanity starts off with an understanding of God as this all-being, everything, does everything. Just like an infant who only understands their parents is that all-powerful being who provides me with everything I need. But as, of course, you grow up, the relationship becomes a little more complicated. And then you hit adolescence, which I would argue is just when Jesus came. Adolescence is when you see everything new for the first time. You just, all of a sudden, everything explodes in your mind. And no one has ever seen a sunset like this one before. No one has ever fallen in love before the way I have fallen in love with that other kid, right? Which begs the question of how they got there in the first place. But think about that one for a moment. No one has ever seen the wrong going on in this world the way I see it. No one has ever seen the beauty of the world before. This is what it means to be an adolescent. To wake up, to see things, and to say, I can't believe it. This was here all along. Now, if you're older than 20, you can sit there and say, well, we knew this already. because we've been through it. But if you are in the middle of this, it's new. And it must be new. Because you're waking up. You're opening your eyes as if for the first time. And when Jesus talks to his disciples, what is he saying to them? Open your eyes. Look around you. The world is here. God is coming. I will be with you. And adolescence does something else. It changes the relationship of the child to the parent. It just does. It has to. You can't continue to be a child anymore, but that means separating some. If we are also changing, if Jesus came to change our relationship with God the Father, then it's understandable that it goes through some rocky times. And it's understandable that we sit there and say, well, I don't know about this, God. What's going on with this? But that's okay, because we get through adolescence. And when we do, then we knock on the door and we say, I get it. And we can dance to the same old song over Skype. Maybe not with God with Skype. You can just dance any way you want. But the point is, the relationship is healed and changed and matured. We are in the midst of adolescence, and Advent is basically the time where we say, open your eyes, see the world, see how God is. That's what this is all about. This is why it's so wonderful. That's why it's so powerful. Having said that, Advent isn't just about adolescence. Just like those ads weren't just about a kid and a teenager and an adult. Adolescence is all about also pregnant expectation. It's about being one, participating in the same thing that the father before had. It's about that kid who knocks on the door and says, here's your new mug, world's best grandpa. Or that ring where you can dance together over the Skype. That's what it's about, expecting the child. And we are also part of that expectancy. Now, in our faith, and in fact in Judaism, expectancy has been there all along. People have known God's coming. They just didn't quite get how. So if you read that passage from Jeremiah, he says, in those days and at that time I will cause a righteous branch to spring up for David, and he shall execute justice and righteousness in the land. Wait for it, it's coming. The superhero is coming, the Savior is coming, and it's going to execute righteousness and justice. But what does that look like? For the longest time we thought that meant somebody's going to come in and beat up the bad guys. And Jesus says, the coming one isn't going to save us from all those things. The coming one is going to save that relationship, the strained relationship between the adolescent and the adult. That's what the coming one is going to do. So that we understand that the love of that adult was there all along and never went away and was never going to go away. And never will go away. So we understand what it's like to be part of creation. Advent is this time where we're called to be aware of everything around us all the time. The church is still trying to figure that out. Just yesterday, there was a meeting of a task force in our region called the Task Force, I don't know the exact name, but Task Force on the Way of Love. And if that sounds weird, it gets weirder. It is all about forming a rule of life. And what does that mean? Some of you may know, most probably not. A rule of life, though, is very simple. It is developing we'll call it a discipline, or a plan, or a path in which we open our eyes and see God in everything. One of my favorite contemplatives is a guy named Richard Rohr, and he wrote recently that a Christian is simply a person who has learned how to look around and see Christ in everything. A rule of life is simply a way, a sort of a discipline, so you can have some things in mind to do to be able to help you look around and see God in everything and to see Christ in each other. We all can have rules for life, or rules of life. When I was in college, when I was 19, in fact, I came up with one for myself. It was real simple, and I'm positive I've told you about it before, but people forget 3 minutes after the sermon. No, I'm just kidding. When I was in college, I went off to college, and I decided to make a rule for myself. Every day, at the end of the day, I was going to write down at least one thing new I had done that day that I'd never done before. And you would think to yourself, well, you're going to run out of things very quickly, and you never do. I still do that, at least in my head. And sometimes I actually write it down. Something new that I've done or experienced today that I've never done before. Think about that. That is a rule. And it's something that allows you to become aware. And it's something that allows you to see Christ in everything. When you are expecting this child, not only the Christ child, but the one who's coming into our hearts, you get excited. And it's a new, wonderful thing that's never happened before, even though we've been doing this for 2,000 years. But when we open up our eyes, when we look, when we see, when we are aware of others, then we grow into a new love, into a new relationship. That's what Advent is all about. Becoming aware, opening our eyes. And when we do that, we can sort of look at those commercials, and we can see that even though they were just secular ads selling something, they say something to us that we need to hear. They say something which is that the one who made us loves us. Loves us always. Even when we walk away. Even when we roll our eyes. Even when we say, oh, this is really the dumbest thing in the world. That love never stops. They say to us that sometimes that passageway from childhood is a child that wants to be rescued by a superhero, not an adult. We have to make that passage from childhood into adulthood. And it's rough sailing sometimes. But when we do it, when we get through the other side, that love that was there when we were small children, it's the same love. Only now we get to be partners in it. Amen.